Hello friends, thank you for joining me again today. My name is Dan. This is Daily Art Adventure number 583. Can you believe it? And I've shortened the title to Am I Better Than I Was? In the longer on the YouTube channel, I say, am I better than I was 1, 3, and 5 years ago? Let's get it official. There. I like to say, now, whoops, and I don't have any monitor, so let's try to get that fixed. Bear with me for just a minute. If I can't hear myself, it makes me nervous that you guys are getting a bad sound, so forgive me. Come on. All right. Now, there we go. All right. Again, thank you for joining me. So as you see, I'm doing a fairly large painting here, roughly 6 feet 4 by 7 feet 5, I think is exactly what it is. And I've been working on it this morning already for some time. Yesterday, I did these 2 buildings online. This morning, or this afternoon, I should say, I finished this bunch of buildings and then started the sky. And I was having a fine old time painting all by myself, but decided this would be a good moment to bring you guys in. So I'm painting with fairly large brushes, and I just decided, just for fun, to ask the question. Oh, let me think quieter than usual. Let's see if that's me or that's you. Oh, that's me. There we go. There we go. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Hope you can hear me better now. So I'm painting a sky. That's a pretty standard operating procedure for somebody who paints mostly landscapes, right? We paint a lot of skies, don't we? Speaking of painting skies, I judged a show last week in Wilmington, North Carolina. And one of the things, and I did a walk around critique. You can see that if you want, just a couple days ago. And one of the items that seemed to come up most often in my critique, there were, of course, as you can imagine, quite a few landscape paintings that I was called upon to judge, along with many others. And one of the principles that came up, I've talked about this before, but let me just do it again since it comes to mind. It's the subject I learned. The topic is called boundary ratios, something I learned from one of my mentors here in Raleigh, North Carolina, Bob Rankin. I don't know if I don't suppose he imagines that he's one of my mentors. So if anybody knows Bob, please send him a warning. Say, by the way, do you know that Dan Nelson is claiming you as one of his mentors? I've never taken official lessons from Bob, even though that would be great fun. But I've watched him, I've listened to him, I've watched him paint, and more importantly, perhaps, he's watched me paint. And he's always got really good. I would love to have the spirit of Bob Rankin hovering over my left shoulder with every painting I was doing. Man, that would be wonderful. Anyway, Bob Rankin, look him up. Abstract, almost completely non-objective. Every once in a while he does some truly abstract, which means representational, but I like his non-representational stuff best. Anyway, what I learned from him, one of my mentors, Bob Rankin, and he learned it from somebody else, but I forget who that was, so I'm just going to give credit to Bob. He calls it boundary ratios. Now, you painters, you listen to this. This is really, really helpful. That's why I'm sharing it. I learned it from Bob, and I'm sharing it with you because it's helpful. He says, so most paintings have 4 boundaries, right? Top, bottom, left, and right from your side. Top, bottom, left, right. And he says that the number of major color breaks along each of those boundaries matters. And, in a word, you would like to have a different number of major color breaks at each edge. You can call it edge ratios, I suppose, too, as well as boundary ratios. And when it comes to landscapes, here's where this issue becomes really helpful, because a lot of times painters will do a landscape, and what's at the top? Sky, of course. And what if it's a blue sky? They'll have blue all the way across. So let me add one more addendum to my description. It's good to have a different number of major color breaks on each edge, each boundary. And a color break of 1 is not a good number. In other words, having the same color along any boundary, generally speaking, is not a good thing. You catching that? And you can see why that is particularly pertinent to landscape painters and sky, because many times, the sky we're looking at, or the sky we're making up, or the photograph we're looking at, will have straight, pure blue sky all the way across the top of the scene. And that is not a good thing. So the most common go-to solution, if you don't have a building or a tree, okay, so how many, well, I'm not done yet, but at the moment I have one major color and maybe to there. Let's say red to there, then blue to here, red again, and then a tree. But I'm not done with this yet, so some of those won't stay just the way they are right now. The number one go-to solution for a landscape painter, and you don't want blue sky looking at me, nothing but blue skies do I see. That's a bad thing for an artist. You want different colors along the top of your painting. So the number one go-to is to put a big cloud of some kind, either a cirrus, a sweeping, curving cirrus cloud, that goes like this and breaks the top, or a big cumulus cloud, or cumulonimbus cloud, storm cloud that breaks that barrier. That's just a real quick and easy solution for that. Okay, let me get back then to my hypothetical question, sort of. Well, anyway, I don't want to argue whether it's hypothetical or real. Am I a better painter than I was 1, 3, or 5 years ago? Well, now, first of all, my instant answer to that is going to be, of course, absolutely. Well, that's the easy part. The not so easy part is, oh yeah, smarty pants, prove it. Oh, whoa, okay, wait, I didn't know you were going to ask me to prove it. So that's a little bit harder, is it not? So as I'm painting, let me just try to think out loud with you about what am I doing different right now while I'm painting that I might not have done 1, 3, or 5 years ago. Now, 1 year, I'm not so sure. No, I've got some things. I'll share that. 3 years, there's no question. My painting had a significant boost 3 years ago when I attended Oil Painters of America in Dallas and got a critique from one of the OPA masters who was younger than me. That was a little irritating. I'm sort of jesting. And he pointed out correctly, and I knew it was correct as soon as he said it. He said, too many hard edges. I went, oh. It was a slap of palm to forehead moment. Like, duh, of course, I knew that. And he didn't, as soon as he said it, it's like, it's like, I knew that intuitively. Just somehow I hadn't, anyway. So as of 2.5 years ago, my paintings have been tried to keep them decidedly more soft edges. Now, I say that here today because I just had a little bit of a palm to forehead moment just a few minutes ago when I stood back and looked at this and said, doggone it, too many hard edges. Dang. Right when you think you're getting better. Okay, so whether I'm getting better or not still remains an open question. Whether I'm getting better at soft edges, I mean, it's still, I'm conscious of it, and I'm trying to attempt it, trying to accomplish it. Now, when I talk like this, I often imagine in the back of my mind, you know, how a non-artist would hear. I'm assuming that most people that are watching me, at least watching me for any length of time at all, are my fellow artists, right? A lot of what I say, which seems like it would just probably be pretty boring to people who aren't artists. So I'm assuming that if you're watching for any length of time, you're an artist. And I often wonder, you know, for me to say something like more hard edges, or I mean more soft edges, that I can imagine like a engineer going, well, then just do it. And that might be the counsel I need, truly. But why is it easier said than done? Well, that's because, at least let me give you one attempt. And by the way, okay, this is not in the last 5 years. I'm a right-hand, you see I'm painting with two hands. Most people notice that fairly early on. And I'm right-handed. And here I am, while I was talking, I'm going to go merrily, happily, contentedly painting away with my left hand, not even particularly thinking about it. Not. So that's a marked improvement. If you had said to me 20 years ago that when you're in your 60s, when you're in your late 50s and 60s, you're going to paint almost all the time with two hands. Now, if I knew you were a godlike creature who was telling the truth, then I would have started painting with two hands 25 years ago. But if I didn't know that, I would just think you were crazy. It's like, what are you talking about? You can't paint with two hands. I mean, you know. Anyway, so here I am, though. And so I'm definitely a better painter than I was 15 years ago because I now paint with two hands. Anyway, so I can imagine an engineer saying, well, if you need more soft edges, then just paint more soft edges. And I was going to say, well, there's the rub, because it's not just a matter of soft edges, is it? It's because the priority over that is this whole concept that I talk about all the time of interesting marks. The essence of good painting is making interesting marks. So it's not merely, not simply soft edges, it's soft edges with a overarching trajectory, if I can use that language, which is pleasant marks. That's the overall trajectory, if you will. Let me point out, though, let me zoom in here for a second, and this is probably within the last year. I did it before then, but it's more pronounced now, and it's more intentional. I do it with more understanding than I used to. So I have here a red streak of something. Well, I know what it is. It was one of those oil sticks, which I have momentarily misplaced. I'll show them to you when I see them, but it's an oil paint in the form of a stick, right? And in between layers, I kind of go crazy and just make a whole bunch of marks. I really do wonder where they are. Oh, well, anyway, that's one of those. So first of all, that's something that's fairly new in the last year, that I make more extraneous marks. Okay, I'll describe for you how I've improved even in the last year. Yeah, definitely in the last year. Here it is. And if you're on my YouTube channel, which you are, but if you want to see my YouTube channel, of course, click on my picture there. It'll take you to my channel. Then there's home, videos, playlists, or something like that. And then community. Click on community, scroll down a little bit, and you'll see my latest outline of Dan Nelson's painting process. And I say there, it's always changing. And it's even what's there is approximate. So it's not a Bible. It's just a general outline of my painting process at this point. Well, and if you look at that, I'll just say it this, I have step 1, and then a little color bar after step 1, it says something like make a mess on purpose. I call it intentional, intermittent messiness. Intentional, means I'm doing it on purpose. Intermittent, that means periodically in between all the other layers. Intermittent, periodic messiness. Or after every layer, make a mess. So that's new. That's part of where this came from. Now, the trick that I'm modeling right at this moment of actually not only not covering up all of those marks, I do cover up some of them. I don't keep every one, but I keep some of them. Let me show you where there's another. Hey, Rick Charlotte, appreciate that. Yeah, I was fairly happy with the wedding painting. Here's some more. Do you see this mark right here? And that one right there, and that one right there. There's 3 of them right together. And then I have to ask myself the question, well, is 3 too much? And the answer is maybe. That's why this is a final edit layer. I get to cover up what I don't like. But how have I changed in the last year? Definitely with that intentional, conscious, so intentional, so conscious that it's now on my list of how I paint. So I've got like 15 steps, I think, and in between each one of those it says intentional, intermittent messiness. So I actually have 30 steps in my painting process. So that's one way that how do I paint different today than I did just a few years ago? That's one answer. Is I'm now much more conscious of making a mess. And I also have new tools and new toys for making those messes. One is, I just mentioned to you a minute ago, the oil stick, which I can't find, it's around here somewhere. But in the acrylic stage, I have here a box of solid watercolor sticks, which mix really well with the acrylic stage. Okay, so there's 2 things that I've done in the last year that's even less than a year, 6 months, that makes me think, yep, I'm a better painter now than I was even 6 months ago. And hallelujah, I can't wait to be a better painter in 6 months than I am today. And if trends continue, which is likely, I feel like not only have I improved, I've been doing essentially this kind of painting for 15 years. Some of you have heard that. 2004 is when I started. That's another story, but I'll just leave it at that. And during that time, I've been evolving the whole time. I think since I started broadcasting about 27 months ago now, beginning of 2017, I'm even more conscious of my evolution, my painting evolution, than I was before I was broadcasting. So it feels to me like my learning curve is actually accelerating. My learning curve is not, I'm 65 years old, and my learning curve is still steep. It's not leveling off, I don't think, at all. I'm still evolving, which is encouraging to me too. I'm saying that to say, why do I think I'm going to be a better painter in 6 months? Because that's been the pattern for 15 years, and I don't see any sign of that slowing down. So back to how else am I better than I have been in the last. I'll say this as well, and this is a related statement. For the last 8 years, maybe 7, maybe 9, I've had a conscious, and by that I mean I stated it out loud, I spoke to my friends, not just an intuition, but a conscious objective in my painting has been, for me, has been to paint messier and more accurate. Okay, so those are two opposing forces. So, and this particular painting is a pretty good example of that. This is a very accurate rendering. In fact, some of you know I did an almost unheard of thing for me. I used a grid to lay out this composition. In fact, here I still have, can you see the little tiny grid lines that I did in Photoshop? So it's a very accurate rendering. And things like, even more specifically, let me see if I can get all the way down here. Yeah, to these cars. I used to let my vehicles be much more loose and inaccurate. And that has changed. That's changed in the last year. There we go. That's a very specific example of how I've changed. Just cars. That's pretty funny. That's pretty particular, isn't it? So I've been on this trajectory, I was starting to say, for the last 8 years, let's say, to be neater. No, that's wrong. To be more accurate in my drawing and yet more messy in the effect. So here's very specifically in the last year, how have I improved? And if you've followed me at all in the last year, you've heard me say things like this, that I'm continually surprised at the degree to which we artists, not just me, but many others, we can throw extraneous marks. I've never said it this way, so this is good. I like coming up with new ways of saying old things. It surprises me the extent to which we can throw non-realistic marks on the canvas, and the image per se doesn't suffer. That our brain has no trouble working around those extraneous, not obviously non-realistic. That's it. Do you understand? I'm talking about marks here that are clearly not realistic. They're not put down because they add to the similitude, to the realism of the scene. Now, what I'm doing right now is not that. But what I showed you just a few minutes ago about that mark right there, it comes up here, this one and this one, that has nothing to do with realism. Does that make sense? And you could see here the blue paint that I've dragged these brushes a great deal across this building. So that's a non-realistic mark. And now I like it well. This one got a little bit too scratchy, so I'm going to muff it out a little bit. So, and this is all wet paint. So of course, rubbing on it with a rag, all of that results in non-realistic marks. So, and the marks that I just made, I was almost off camera right down there. I just added this little blush, if I can call it that, blush of blue, sky blue. So that awareness, and expressed exactly that way, that it amazes me the extent to which our mind, the viewer's mind here, I'm not talking about the artist, I'm talking about the way the extent to which the viewer's mind can look around marks that are clearly and intentionally non-representational, non-realistic, and still perceive the image without any trouble. And I mentioned yesterday, by the way, I was really helped in this journey, or encouraged in this journey, this past Friday afternoon. I was in Wilmington, and I just took the liberty of dropping in, lucky that he was there, and dropped in on Dan Beck, who is one of the big dogs, I call him. There's a little bit of envy in there, you understand that? When I call him a big dog, it's because I want to be a big dog too. But the only way to get there is work my little paws off. Work my tail off. Don't be laying around like a dog if you want to be a big dog. Anyway, Dan Beck. You can Google him. Google Dan Beck artist. And you will see that he is way messier than I am. Way messier than I am. And he does mostly figurative stuff. And so just to be there, be in his studio, see his stuff, talk with him, and so on, you know, just makes my ambition to be more loose, encourages it, because I go, wow, that guy's really... Now I was talking about him yesterday, so I don't want to be Dan Beck. I don't want to paint like... I can't paint like Dan Beck, but I can indeed be influenced by him. How much? That's hard to say. It's just like some of you want to be influenced by me. Good for you. How much? That's what we can't. That's what we can't. You can't be me. You can't paint like me, but you can be influenced by me. And I've been influenced, of course, over the decades by many people. Here's a funny. I haven't talked about this in a long time. Do you know who actually? One of my artistic muse, the artist who perhaps influenced me the most from the late 80s into the just brightening my light a little bit here, into the late 90s. I just chose him, just picked him up, was Maxfield Parrish. He died in 1960, something like that. Google him. Anyway, that's who I chased, just for fun. Who has influenced me? Who have I chased? That's number one. That was as an illustrator I was working. He was very tight painter, so I'm not chasing him in that regard at all anymore. But still, love his work. Fantasy painting is really, I don't know if it was called that back then, but that's what he did. All right, now let's get, my sky might be done. And if so, then how many color sec I have? I'll call this all that is one major, going back to boundary ratios. Pinkish red, 1, then solid blue, 2, and then tree 3. So I have a boundary number of 3 at the top, which is good. I have, over here I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Over here I have 1, it's hard to say, 1, 2, 3, 4 maybe. And at the bottom, it's too much, all one color right now. So that's a little issue that I'm gonna have to address before I finish the painting. Right now I want to mix up a considerably paler blue than I've been using it, and warmer, so I'm adding a little bit of yellow ochre to it, because I keep thinking I'm making it lighter, and then I put it down and it's not any lighter than it was already there. Let's try this now. There we go. I want you all know, don't you, that a sky, of course, grows paler as we approach the horizon. Also, this light blue stuff on my brushes gives good opportunity to scribble in some clouds. I find it very advantageous to paint clouds with two hands. Again, because if I paint with one hand, especially if it's my right hand, if I paint with my one hand, with my right hand, my brain can keep up. But if I paint with two hands, my brain can't quite keep up. So I'm more likely to paint in a free and kinesthetic manner and not slip into painting fluffy clouds, which I do not want to do. In other words, I love clouds. I can paint really, really realistic clouds. So I spent a whole lifetime studying clouds. So painting realistic ones is like falling off a log for me. That would be so, in fact, I could be contented doing nothing but paintings of clouds all the rest of my life. Just about. Don't call me on that. I don't want to do that. But I could be quite content painting realistic skyscapes. But it would be slipping into that impulse, giving into that temptation, if you will, would be a huge mistake, right? Because it would be out of keeping with all the rest of this painting. So I do not want to paint nice white fluffy clouds. I want to paint abstract marks that, oh, by the way, accidentally look an awful lot like clouds. Okay, I think I've achieved that. Okay, if you guys hang on, give you a little part of the show here. As you can see, I've taken my painting off my easel to paint that sky. I'm going to try to get it back up. I would guess the painting weighs about 40 pounds, something like that. And I'll lean it back a little bit. All right, so there. Let me raise you guys up a little bit too. I believe I'm going to keep this broadcast fairly short. There we are. It's as high as it can go out here in the garage. Yeah, there are a few things I want to do down here at the bottom, and I might just go ahead and tackle those while you're with me. By the way, I just picked up a brush that's stiff as a board. I have stuff indoors in my studio that you soak that for a week in this product, and it will soften right back up. Now, it will never be as good as new, so it's not wonderful to let brushes get stiff as a board, but I want you, some of you maybe don't know that just because a brush dries, don't throw it out. Oh my goodness. I would go broke if I wasn't able to revive stiff brushes. There are a number of products, by the way, that do that job. Here, since I'm on the subject here, let me show you. Here's the best one if it's not completely stiff, is Gojo hand cleaner. Did you get that? And it takes, you know, a good 5 or 10 minutes of elbow grease, rubbing the brush in the palm of your hand with the Gojo. But that'll get the job done. And that, when you do that, the brush is usable as soon as you finish. You know, in 10 minutes, it can be a pretty good brush, and it's actually pretty good on the bristles. It doesn't damage the bristles like the other chemical does. Anyway, don't throw out those brushes if you accidentally let one get stiff. And frankly, I don't know how you could. You can do like Mark Carter. That's another story. But if you're a hardworking artist like I am, it's just going to happen. At least that's what I think. Okay, let me... Teaching moment that was. And maybe you all already knew that. But yeah, don't throw out those stiff brushes. There's a whole bunch. Just Google brush cleaner restorer. Make sure it says, you know, for dried paint. It's not like the soap kind of brush conditioners, cleaners. No. This is something different. This is for brushes that are, without this intervention, they're dead. All right, back down to the bottom of the painting now. I just spent a few minutes trying to clean up my palette, which was, as you can imagine, was covered with blue paint. Imagine that. Now, I have to think about this, of course. I have to think about everything, don't you? You have to think about everything, don't you? That's mean to say there. One of the traditional tricks that I'm playing with my composition here is a dark threshold. It's called, by some people, a threshold, a shadow that goes all the way across the road, which makes sense because of the angle of the sun and so on and so forth. But it's a again, just sort of a designer trick to get us into the composition, rather than have this come all the way down out of the frame. The downside is, boundary ratio wise, I have basically one color all the way across that bottom of the painting. That's, generally speaking, not a good thing. Now, I just realized I'm going to fix something else while I'm down here. More liquid, please, sir. All right, most of you know it's my medium of choice is liquid. The downside of it is a little bit odoriferous, a little bit smelly. So that's not very pleasant. So you have to, here I am out in my garage. So there's some ventilation going on out here. Anyway, I want to do a shadow that's too brown. So am I making, quiz time, am I making this part of my canvas lighter or darker? Duh, darker, right? Correct, you with me? Therefore, I'm doing it with what kind of paint? Transparent. Now that doesn't mean you run off to the store and look at the back for transparent paint. No, I made it transparent with liquid. Well, the bottle I just showed you. All right, just, I know that's old review, you guys all know that, but just want to make sure in case we have any newcomers. So you make it darker the way a watercolor painter makes some part of the painting darker, by applying transparent glazes, okay? And then if you want it lighter, then of course, then you introduce white to whatever color it is you're painting with. The next rule, by the way, is rule, quote unquote rule, is that anytime you add dark to your canvas, that's only the wind-up. The follow-through is to add light next to the dark that you just put down, either on top of, adjacent to, close to, and so forth. So all the dark that I just put here is not done. I'm going to come back and do some of this light color near that. But I think I want, it might be a little bit too much. Hang on. I think I want this. Yeah, there we go. That's better. Let it fade a little bit more. Now, does that help me any? Yeah, I think it does, actually. Does it help me with this boundary ratio at the bottom? And I think it will. So here's what I'm going to do. Instead of having that shadow threshold, I called it, that goes all the way across the bottom of the canvas, I'm going to put a break in it, I think. So now, am I making this part of the canvas darker or lighter? I know, forgive me, I know it's a stupid question, but just bear with me. I'm making it lighter, right? You get dark with transparent color, you get light with opaque color. Now, I do have the luxury right now of, since this is all dry. Okay, great, thanks. Leftovers available for lunch. Sounds great. I do have the luxury that if everything I'm painting on right now is already dry, so if I don't like what I've just done, I can pick up a rag and wipe it all off. But I think I like it. Let me give another quick explanation then of process. Oh, and this would go again under the heading of how am I better today than I was 1, 3, and 5 years ago. And I did do this some years ago, but not nearly as consistently and intentionally and with as much understanding. And what is this? The answer is doing a final glaze after what is now, this is called my final edit layer. In years past, at this point, my painting was essentially finished, but now it is not. Now I usually have an additional layer, come back and do a glaze on top of the final edit layer. So that's, again, I did it, but I'm more intentional. I do it with more understanding now and more consistently than I used to. Mixing up get slightly lighter color of what I just put down. That's common practice for me and should be for you too. Come on over here, Uncle Dan will tell you how to fix your life. You too should follow up in the opaque realm. When you put down one color, you follow it up with a color slightly lighter than what you just put down, on top of what you just put down. All right? And all your problems be over. Oh, that life was so simple. Okay, enough of those big, messy brushes. Let's get something slightly smaller now. So again, a slightly even lighter again. Now that stripe right there, that's a stripe on the road. That's what that's supposed to be. That's not just an abstract mark. That one's actually representational. So I expect my trajectory over, let's say, over the next year. How do I think I'm going to improve? Boy, I wish I had a crystal ball, because if somebody could show me how I'm going to paint a year from now, I promise I could start doing it today. But that's not the way the cosmos works, is it? So I'm going to have to just get there one bloody step at a time. But I expect the general trajectory that I mentioned a little while ago to continue. That is, I want my drawings to be more accurate and my paintings, I've never put it this way. Okay, here, let me say it this way. I want my drawings to be more accurate and my paintings to be more messy. Now, and when I say drawings here, I'm not talking about graphite drawings. I'm talking about the drawing in my painting. So I want the drawings of my painting to be more accurate, even more realistic, if you will, and yet the painting's more messy. So those are opposites. And if you feel like confused about how those two things fit together, then way to go, you're paying attention. If you're not confused, you're probably not paying any attention, and that's all right. Wow, lots of good chats over there. I can't wait to see what you guys have said. I'm just about done with this broadcast. In fact, there's not a whole lot more I can do. This whole painting needs to dry before I can, tomorrow, I hope, do the glaze process that I talked about. And at the same time, tomorrow, I could do some today, is a little bit more broken color. There's an area in the last year. How have I improved? Just in the last year, with much more intentional broken color process. And I've talked about that a whole bunch, and we'll talk about it again, so I'm not going to define it right here. But it's basically same value, different or unusual or contrasting, usually not a representational, not an accurate copy of reality, but a purely arbitrary color. So that is definitely something that I've stumbled on in the last year. All right, so I've at least theoretically, by the way, and you have to watch out, you don't paint by theories, of course, you paint by reality, but theoretically, that problem I had down here at the bottom has been alleviated, because now I have a number of three major color breaks, 1, 2, 3, and maybe even a slight one right there. So I don't like that mark. That was dangerously close to an erasing mark, wasn't it? I tell my students all the time, don't erase, don't erase, don't erase. And sometimes I do it myself. But I will say confidently, I don't let the spirit of eraser come on me. Do you know what the spirit of eraser is? That's that self-accusatory, self-cursing, oh, I'm such an idiot. And then you proceed to quote unquote erase, right? That's the real danger of erasing, if you will, is that and don't tell me you don't do that. Believe me, I hang out with enough, and I know it, the process, I know the impulse within my own self, that's a real temptation. All right, I think I'm at a point where I'm going to take a little break. I'm going to come back out here. I'm going to go in and eat some lunch. Aren't you glad I'm giving you my whole life story here? Go in and eat some lunch, and then come back and do some broken color and be done with the final edit and ready to do glazes tomorrow. But let me look at you guys who've been kind enough to leave a chat. Let me come back and see what you're saying. Whoa, you're saying a lot of stuff. Hi to all you guys. Bruno, Shanna, Artist Rose, David, Rick, David again. Appreciate it. Oh, by the way, speaking of new tools, somebody said here, new tool. David Mercer. I just was at a cheap tool store today and bought these. I have some of these, but they're hanging over in my garage. My tool wall, you know? I'm one of those guys that has pegboard and all my tools are up there, traced, outlined, because that's my personality. Anyway, so it's palette knives, giant size. I've been using this one, and I will continue to do so. But that one's plastic. These are metal. So Yahoo, part of my new season in life where I'm doing more big paintings. John Rope says you're most definitely better. So many established artists are doing roughly. Roughly what? Doing rough? I'd like to be an established artist, John. In my dreams, I'm an established artist. Oh no, I am established. I'll go that far. Okay, there we go. And let me finish your sentence. Thank you. So many established artists are doing roughly today what they did 10 years ago. To quote a 19th century social philosopher, you constantly revolutionize the means of painting production that makes you unique and an inspiration. John Rope, you're exactly correct. In fact, if I may, if you follow me, anybody, John follows me, but some of you, I say good things about Richard Schmid all the time because he's one of my favorite living artists. Shh, but don't tell anybody I said this. He used to have his website, maybe still does, outlined by decade. You know, here's the 2010s, 90s, 80s, 70s, and so forth. And when you go back to what he was doing in the 70s, it's virtually identical as far as I could tell, which gives me great pause. I mean, it means he was a freaking genius at a very young age. He's a freaking genius anyway, but that is very strange to me. Anyway, good point, John. I think you're exactly right. Shandang Ram, thank you. And Thinker 888 agrees. Thank you, I agree. Is the sky using alkyd or is it still liquid that you're counting to make it dry faster? No, good question. It is alkyd, titanium white alkyd, definitely, and liquid. Yeah, I added quite a bit of liquid just so it would flow with those big brushes. Very good question. And Vincent says, yeah, the bottom looks too much like a photo with that row of trees should cast a way wider shed, almost covering the road. You might be right. You might be right. So I extended that one. I don't know if that satisfies. But, yeah, maybe you're thinking these should be longer. It's possible. I will give that serious consideration. By the way, Vincent, I don't know what you were talking about yesterday, but I did, before I started broadcasting, I got a carpenter square out, and I did have to straighten out that blue building. I'm not sure if that's the one you were talking about, but I did. And for the rest of you, I'm here. So I thought I had finished this building yesterday. And then it looks suspiciously crooked, like, is that crooked? So I got, not a T-square, but a carpenter square, and laid it up there. And I'm glad that I did that, because it turns out I had to repaint some of that. That was earlier today. Thanks, Vincent. Thanks. So I've got all these cars. Their brake lights are on because they're coming into town to go around this steep curve. This guy hasn't applied his brakes yet. Now we're getting to traffic debates. He's going downhill. Should he have his brakes on? Maybe. Is he about to get a speeding ticket? Maybe. And Hannah, thank you. You're sweet. Appreciate that. Stunning as ever and taller than you are. That's right. Thank you, Thinker 888. Love the, I too. I like the light. That is actually one of the things I'm going to do here is play with this just a little bit more. Not so much maybe a little bit of brighter light popping through, but secondary values popping through. Some greens and pale gold browns. So it's not just like this band right here is more or less mostly two-tone, except for I've got some definite broken color. But I want to come in there and make it a little bit more variety there. But thanks for noticing that. And Hannah says, what I like most about your technique is that you paradoxically add paint to take away from your structures and shapes. Yes, 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 yes. Like you carve the painting exactly the way a sculptor does. Very well put. That's exactly right. Use that technique almost everywhere, a lot. Yeah, paint a mass of trees and then cut it out with opaque paint by punching in the light stuff in between. You're exactly right. I do a lot of that in both going in both directions, opaque and dark and light. Thank you, Hannah. Good observation. And Benji says, I love the way this is coming along. Thank you, Benji. Appreciate that very much. And Jose Van Holland, good to have you on board. And Vincent here lately says, the trees are too much and should have roundness shadow. You might be right. I wonder, is this line too regular? And that is actually the way it is in the photograph, but you know, don't you? All of you know that's not a good excuse. It's the most common excuse given by visual artists. Why did you do that? And the answer is because that's the way it is in the photograph. And everybody says, whoops, that's not a good answer, is it? There actually is more of a break in here. Not a bad idea, because that's a little bit of a too straight of a... I'm not sure that's what you're saying, David, but it does make me think... I'm going to exaggerate. I'm going to bring this down a little bit and maybe down here too. So good insights, all of you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Yahoo! I am excited about this painting. I'm having a great time. I hope I can sell paintings of this size. Oh, I'm sorry. Here's the line I was talking about. I forgot I had that camera zoomed in. Here, this should have perhaps more cut. So I'm going to do that, I think. Sorry about that. I am loving painting this new size. This is a new era for me. The question remains whether I'll be able to sell paintings this size. At my prices this size, this is a $12,000 or $11,000. Am I saying that right? Yeah, $11,700 painting at this size. So that's a big chunk of change. Obviously, I'm aiming at people not like me. If I have $12,000, I'm definitely not going to spend it on a painting. But, you know, it's not people like me. I'm trying to get to buy paintings. If I got $12,000 laying around, I'm going to do what we're doing, which is repair our chimney. All right. I'm getting down into the nitty-gritty of our personal life. Thank you all for watching. If you like this, please subscribe, share, leave a comment. If you don't like it, you know, yeah. And keep that between you and me. Okay. Thanks, guys. Enjoyed it very much. Any last note?